Tom Pelissero is here. Good to see you, Tom. How's it nice? Hello.
Hey, Tommy.
Hello, boys in the studio. And, okay. All right.
Wow. The disdain.
Serious subject matter, so let's all bring it in. What is going on with T.J. Watt in Pittsburgh, PA? Tom, what happened?
So the timeline, as I understand it, is that T.J. Watt came into the facility on Wednesday morning and he had some pain. He went and did his workout. It was a player's day off, but he went in there to lift. He then went through his normal dry needling treatment. And then after the treatment, he was still in pain. They performed a bunch of different tests. At first, they were thinking based on where the pain was that maybe it was his collarbone. They ruled that out. They then did x-rays on his ribs. That came back negative. Then they did some additional tests that revealed a small hole in his lung. J.J. Watt took to Twitter with similar but not exactly the same version of the story, saying that it's a partially collapsed lung for J.J. TJ via JJ blaming the Steelers team physicians or the people giving that treatment for the injury. My understanding is that may be a little bit more to that piece of the story, but at any rate, not likely that TJ Watt is going to be able to play on Monday night against the Dolphins. Sounds like this is just something where he just needs to rest based upon the procedure that he had done to repair that hole in his lung, the partially collapsed lung. Could be back as soon as the following week's game. But obviously for a Steelers team that needs every one of these wins to hold off the Ravens in the AFC North, not great to be without one of your best players in all likelihood on Monday night.
So I guess the question is the reporting on how this happened, right? I mean, you mentioned JJ's post. I think we have it, and where this goes from here. And after a dry needling treatment session at the facility, man, that's scary. That's as scary as it comes, man. I mean, with what's going on. So it's just rest and then maybe back in week 16. That's what you're saying.
That is what it sounds like at this point. And again, if TJ Watt wants to go down the road of a grievance through the NFLPA or, punch any of those buttons, then perhaps there will be more answers forthcoming about exactly what happened. Again, my understanding is he came in to the facility on Wednesday with pain already. After the dry needling session, that's when he continued to experience the pain. He went into the hospital. He had a battery of tests done. They were able to rule out a bunch of different things, including a rib issue, but he did have a puncture, a small hole in his lung. They fixed that. Now it's just a matter of resting, probably not a situation where he's going to be ready to play football in 3 days, but potentially as soon as week 16, TJ Watt should be back for a Steelers team that, even though Alex Highsmith is playing at a really high level right now, they certainly could use TJ Watt as well.
All right. Words that I never thought I'd be asking you, Tom, but I'm going to ask you. Is Phillip Rivers playing for the Colts this Sunday?
The final decision, Rich, from what I understand, is not going to come until at least Saturday on Phillip Rivers, which makes sense. He's 44. I'm 44. I'm not attempting to play in the NFL, but anytime that I undertake any physical activity that I have not done in a while, when I go out to briefly shovel a little bit of my driveway that might not have been cleared off well enough, if I lift any boxes, if I get out of bed a certain way, I wait until the next day to see, am I going to be feeling this for a while here? Did I injure anything? They're trying to be as deliberate as they can with Phillip Rivers. Right away, the first practice on Wednesday, he was splitting the first team reps with Riley Leonard, who's dealing with a low-grade PCL sprain. Doesn't sound like that's going to be a big issue for him. Full participant in practice the past couple of days. I would not rule out the possibility, Rich, that we see both quarterbacks play on Sunday in Seattle. It would make some sense. Phillip has already said, and certainly people can be their own judge of what Phillip weighs at this point, what type of shape he's in. Seems like perhaps after 5 years away, like most people, he may not be quite as svelte as he used to be, although as he said himself, it's not like I was ever getting away from anybody. Maybe short yardage, goal line, or their packages for Riley Leonard. Do they want to put, if Phillip Rivers indeed starts, 70 snaps on him or kind of ease him into the mix? Does it even make sense to put him out there after just a few practices or hold him back for another week? Those are the final decisions that need to be made on Saturday. I would say at this point, it would be a surprise if Phillip Rivers does not play on Sunday against the Seahawks. And for the Colts, the sense that I got talking to people last night is whatever it looks like on the field, we know this. In his workout on Monday, I was told his arm looked exactly the same. If anything, he might even have a little more velocity on it than he had back in 2020 because he hasn't had that just, all the reps on his arm through the years. But body-wise, all those things, how does he rebound? How does his arm rebound? Those are all open questions because there's really not a whole lot of precedent for this. Even if they go to Seattle with Phillip or without him and lose that game, you're still in a position where you got the next couple games at home. If you're able to win those, you got 10 wins going into Houston in Week 18. That's not to say this game doesn't matter. If somehow you can steal one from the Seahawks, that would obviously, put you ahead of the game. But the 49ers and the Jaguars at home, those are two really, really big games here. So, kind of the tightrope that they got to walk here. Does it make sense to expose Phillip in the Seattle game, just get him out there, get his feet wet, let him see game speed, or do you hold him back another week? Again, I would be surprised if we don't see Phillip Rivers on Sunday, but final decision is not coming until at least tomorrow.
All right, 40-something Tom Pelissero giving us information and perspective at Tom Pelissero for those who might know of a good chiropractor in the Minneapolis area for Tom right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Knowing what you know and what you're willing to share, how'd you take Joe Burrow's comments that started with, if I want to keep doing this, talking about having fun and not having fun, talking about how there's a lot weighing on him, personal, professional. What can you say about what you heard from Joe Burrow and what it means, Tom?
Joe Burrow has rarely, if ever, had a normal season, Rich. I think start there. And anytime that a player is repeatedly dealing with injuries, it's going to weigh on them, in a lot of different ways. I sat there with Joe Burrow the second week of training camp this year and talked with him. And I, half jokingly said to him, hey, I was supposed to be here two of the last 3 years to interview you. Once you had a wrist injury and the other one you had your appendix out. He's like, oh, it's you. I'm like, no, the fact that I'm here interviewing you now proves I'm not the jinx. But it's become part of, the Joe Burrow experience, which is there's just all these bad luck things that he seems to be dealing with, tearing his ACL in his first year, dealing with the wrist injury that he had, dealing with the appendix. I believe there was a calf or some other injury that he dealt with as well. There's a lot of different things. And then this year to come out, not play, they didn't play great as an offense. It wasn't on Joe. They didn't play great as an offense in week one. Then week two, you suffer a severe turf toe injury. You work your butt off for 2.5 months to beat the timeline and get back. And then in your second game out, it's the defense that lets you down and can't get a stop. Now he throws two, back-to-back picks. One's a pick six in that game, but overall Burrow played at a really high level. And the Bengals, as so often has been the case, they just can't stop anybody. Joe Burrow, got his contract a couple of years ago. He made his push last spring, last January, February, that, hey, we need Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Henderson. We need all those guys back. And they did it. They gave him all those players. The guy who's not been available has been Joe Burrow. And that's not to blame Joe for, having the injuries that he's had. It's just the reality that, your best, your highest paid player, your most important player hasn't been out on the field. I think it's natural, for that to weigh on a guy. Obviously, there's other factors here, like the fact that the defense has been an ongoing issue that leads to some of that frustration. But I looked at that much more about the internal piece of this for Joe Burrow. I mean, if every single year, Rich, you had an injury that took you out for 5 months of the show, by year 7, you'd kind of be like, God, am I going to keep doing this? Like, is this worth it? I'm not enjoying this a whole lot anymore. That's where it seems like Joe Burrow is right now. He still believes he's one of the best in his profession. I agree with him, but you'd like to think that he'd be on the field more than he has been. And it's pretty apparent that mentally, physically, emotionally, that has taken a toll on him.
Okay, so if I pick up what you're putting down, if we gave you a multiple choice of who was he referring to, or what was he referring to about if I want to keep doing this, is he referring to the injury gods? Is he referring to the front office? Is he referring to his coaching staff? You would choose injury gods? Bengals, writ large. You know what I mean? Those are your 4 choices. So who is he referring to about if I want to keep doing this anymore? Because that sure sounds like something that might have been going through Andrew Luck's temples,
Well, and that's
back in the
that
day,
is
Tom.
that's the example was, Andrew Luck walking away when he did, which was,
Right.
a stunning thing in the middle of the preseason in August. But that was years of, the hits adding up. And Andrew Luck played the game differently than Joe Burrow. Andrew Luck played like a linebacker. He wanted that first contact. He wanted to get hit and run people over. Joe, it's not as if he's, exposing himself. Like they have
Right.
been, kind of freaky types of things. You get tackled from behind and your foot bends a certain way. You tear the ligaments in your toe and it ends up being, a 2-3 month type of an injury. So it's one of those deals where
No, I hear Tom. I hear you, but I'm the host of a sports talk radio simulcast on Disney Plus, ESPN app, and ESPN Radio. When I give you a multiple choice question, you must answer it. You know what I mean? Like
injury gods.
Who do you think he's? Okay,
I believe it is injury gods as much as anything. Let's entertain the other options here. If we are talking, as you put it, coaches or Bengals writ large. The idea that Joe Burrow would, for instance, request a trade and that the Bengals would actually grant that request and trade one of the top 5 players in the league when he's healthy would be, I would categorize it as far-fetched for a variety of different reasons. Chief among them, the Bengals don't make trades. It is very, very rare. They've done it more in recent years. They traded Logan Wilson this year. They traded for running back Khalil Herbert last year. But they've made like 3 trades since the 1970s. For Joe, they weren't willing to trade Trey Hendrickson. Their philosophy, Mike Brown's philosophy, has long been, these are my players and you can't have them. The idea that Joe Burrow, they're just going to go, well, Joe's, he's frustrated. We're just going to trade him away. There are so many steps that would have to go into that. Are there different levers that if he is feeling that way, that he and his agent could pull? Certainly. I mean, we've seen wild things happen across the NFL, but it's not as if, oh, well, now that he said that, every team's going to call and the Bengals are going to ship him off in February. That is way many steps down the line before we'd even get to having a realistic discussion about that. What I took away, and I appreciate Joe's honesty when he gets rolling, when he gets talking, he will say honest stuff. And in the sense that I got was there are a variety of reasons that he's frustrated right now. But, how enjoyable would it be if every year, a job that you love and you can't do it 2/3 of the time, that's going to wear anybody out.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, before I let you go, Tom, my frequent question of you is the team that your sources, people who reach out to you, like to kibitz, like to talk, the team that or situation that everybody has been curious about and tongues are wagging about behind the scenes in the National Football League entering the final 4 weeks. What is it?
Well, besides the Colts and dragging a 44-year-old grandfather out of retirement, which I've gotten plenty of people asking for the details on that, I would say that, with really 4 weeks to go, we just kicked off week 15 last night, you're starting to get into just some of the speculation about in terms of, what places could be in for a shakeup on some level. You look at the bottom of the standings. We've obviously already had the Titans fire their head coach. We've had the Giants fire their head coach. The Dolphins made a GM change, and we'll see what direction their search ends up going. You don't have to, be super embedded in this thing to come up with some of the other teams that we're looking at. Last night, the Falcons get a big win, and Raheem Morris was fired up about it. What is their plan moving into the future? By any stretch, this has been a disappointing season. You have seen James Pierce Jr. come on. You did see Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts, for that matter, looking like the Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts you were hoping you were going to get back at the start of 2024 last night. But I would certainly anticipate that there's going to be a top-down review of everything that's going on in that Falcons building as this season winds down. The Raiders are another one. They fired their offensive coordinator. They fired their special teams coordinator. The next question is who else, if anyone, is left to fire? There's certainly going to be questions about Pete Carroll. We'll see how they play down the stretch. Doesn't sound like Geno Smith is going to play this week, so you'll have a backup quarterback in Kenny Pickett, who made some things happen. He looked okay in limited action last week. But there's a lot of decisions that need to be made in Las Vegas. Quite frankly, some of those decisions do point back to Tom Brady, who arrived with great fanfare as a minority owner. Mark Davis saying that, he can help us set the entire program. He can help us identify and draft and develop the quarterback. You look at the results so far. They took a big swing on Ben Johnson. They took some type of a swing on Matthew Stafford. Didn't get either one. They ended up with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. To this point, that has not led to a bunch of wins. They drafted 2 quarterbacks in the 6th round, and neither one of them made the active roster coming out of training camp. So where are you right now as the Raiders? There is a lot that needs to be done on the roster. Nobody's sitting there saying that Pete Carroll has been playing with a full deck this year. But when you hire Pete, who's won a Super Bowl and has won consistently throughout his career. You hire Chip Kelly as the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league, making more money than like 2 or 3 players on your entire offense. You expect the results to be a lot better than what they are now, sitting there on a couple of wins. And there's other places like Arizona. They've got young coaches. My understanding is Michael Bidwell's been really supportive of those guys to this point, but you lose, I think it's now 9 of 10 or 10 out of 11 games. There's certainly going to be an examination of what's gone wrong. Even Washington, for that matter, falling from, the NFC Championship game to being eliminated from postseason contention with a month to go. That's the big questions within the league right now, whether I'm talking to other teams, whether I'm talking to potential candidates. Everybody's trying to figure out exactly how far those dominoes are going to fall. And the honest truth is, Rich, in a lot of these cases, even though we should not be subject to recency bias, even though a game or two should not swing massive organizational multi-million-dollar decisions, the way that you play down the stretch, the way that, for instance, players are responding to Mike McDaniel right now, the way that it seems like the Falcons somehow in a short week showed up with more energy than Todd Bowles' Bucks, to the point that Todd went to the podium and dropped 10 F-bombs in about a 10-second span there. All these things do play into the thinking, and it's the absolute truth that a lot of the decisions we're going to see play out over the next month have not actually been finalized at this point.
And then the minute I have left, you didn't mention the Browns out of all the teams. What do you think?
The Browns situation is, in my mind, speaking just for myself, it's far more complicated because of their organizational structure. Paul DePodesta, who had been there or had been a member of the organization, he was living in San Diego, but had been on every Zoom for a decade and was overseeing the entire organization, had played a big role in building out data and analytics departments. He just left for the Colorado Rockies. So you now have this void atop this sprawling operation that he built there on a team that, quite frankly, has not had a consistent level of success at any time in that past decade. So is that a simple matter of Jimmy Haslam fills that job and continues to move forward the same way? Does it have to do with potentially reorganizing some things, whether it's on the coaching side or the front office side? And then what do you do with the quarterback position? You got 2 first-round picks in 2026. Shedeur Sanders last week, that's the best that he's played. He's shown growth. They want to see him continue to show growth over the back half of the season. You still have Deshaun Watson, who is going to be a member of your team for salary cap reasons as much as anything, though you can make a fair argument that Deshaun at his best is still the best quarterback on the Browns roster. Dylan Gabriel is still there. And then you got those picks to go get someone. That's what I mean when I say this is not checkers here. This is chess when it comes to the Browns. You've got to think about the really, really big picture. And that's what Jimmy Haslam and the people that he trusts within that organization, that's what they're going to be working through here. I don't think that it's as linear as, well, maybe you swap out the 2-time NFL head coach of the year and Kevin Stefanski, bring in a new coach and move forward the same way. There's a lot of other discussions that have to go into exactly what that entire Browns organization looks like in 2026 and beyond.
Well, speaking of playing games, my heart out on the radio is not playing them. So thanks for the time, Tom. I got to say goodbye. You're the man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Phyllis.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.